Studio 33 AD, bringing you Catholic media.
It isn't absolutely clear that Satan knew of the divine identity of Christ at that point of time, which is today's gospel. While their intelligence far exceeds that of any humans, demons do not have awareness of everything that occurs in the material world. The 4th century doctor of the church, St. Ephrem the Syrian, said of this gospel account that perhaps Satan tempted Jesus because a definite sign of Christ's divinity had not yet been given from heaven. The activity of holy people is very attractive to the demonic. And it may just be that they were just trying to figure out who this Jesus was. Christ was not intent on keeping it hidden, though, as he came right out and made the words of Scripture his own. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test. It's interesting that the context in which Christ first reveals his divine identity is in an austere moment of self-examination and testing, a retreat into the desert. It's also interesting that he makes this first revelation not to someone he's come to save, but to the very one that has been the adversary of the salvation of the world since the Garden of Eden. The example of Jesus' time of trial in the desert that the church directs us to imitate during Lent is as much about identity as it is a grounding in self-denial from which comes humility, which is necessary for salvation. And it's not so much about our identity as it is about that of Jesus Christ. There's something about adversity that can crystallize situational awareness. When things are humming along nicely and we're enjoying the ride, we can enter into a very potent sense of security, whether that's real or imagined. And we can catastrophize and lose perspective when everything is going wrong. But by and large, austerity seems to bring clarity and perspective more than comfort and contentment do. And so in Lent, we voluntarily induce some kind of austerity into our lives. But like everything else we do, it can be an exercise of reflexive obligation at best, and at worst, maybe even superstitious acts, where by the time Easter rolls around, all we have to show for our Lenten observance is maybe losing a couple pounds. But what if Jesus is who he says he is? If all it is true, this fantastical story of who Thomas Aquinas once called the very act of being itself, God, sanctifying humanity by becoming human for the purpose of granting a share of his divinity to all of humanity. If this is true, if we actually believe this, how can we go on being the same people we've always been? How do we not make a radical surrender to Christ in ways that would at least get the attention of the people around us and cause them to ask us, what has happened to you? Has anyone ever asked you that? It's very easy to get caught up into a sense of complacency in whatever observance we take on. taking care not to make our sacrifice its own end, and instead the conduit and conveyance to coming ever closer to Christ. There is not a single depiction of Christ in the Gospels that's not meant for us to use as a template for imitation in our own lives. The action of Christ that Paul writes about to the Philippians. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God highly exalted him and bestowed upon him the name that is above every other name. This action Paul extends to us when he writes to the Romans, I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. We make of our lives a sacrifice to God in humility and in the example of Christ, sharing in our humanity that we would share in his divinity. This is God's exaltation of us. By virtue of our baptisms, we are authorized and empowered to make sacrifice in the order of the universal priesthood, along with the ministerial priesthood, making that sacrifice on that altar that is efficacious for our eternal salvation and the salvation of the world. This is one of the reasons why the satanic realm is so intent on harming us. Because of this authorization from God himself and the power that we have been given, if only we would lay hold of it. We only need to look to the lives of the saints who go before us for what this looks like in real time. Most preeminently that of the Blessed Virgin. So let this Lent become an occasion for an intense illumination into the actual and real identity of Christ, of who he claims to be. And if we believe that is true, not just confess with our lips, but believe in our hearts, then who we actually are. What if Satan's dare to Christ to leap off from the towering height of the temple parapet were directed at us? If he is the Son of God, make that leap. I dare you.